Mr. Diamond glanced up from the rear projector roll down and spoke to the first assistant. Okay, break off here and jump ahead on the timeline. Give us a light scan of his counter-terrorist activities from the time he left prison to the present. Yes, sir. It will take just a minute to reset with the help of Fat Boy. Fat Boy was like the CIA and NSA's internet in the 70s. It's basically what the internet is now. With the help of Fat Boy and the sensitive manipulations of the first assistant, Diamond had introduced his guest to the broad facts of Nikolai Hell's life up to the middle of his term of imprisonment, occasionally providing a bit of amplification. Her background detail from his own memory. It had taken only 20 minutes to share this information with him because Fat Boy was limited to recorded incidents and facts, motives, passions, and ideals being alien to its vernacular. Throughout the 22 minutes, Daryl Starr had slouched in the white plastic chair, yearning for a cigar but not daring to light up. He assumed glumly that the details of this gook lover's life were being inflicted on him as a kind of punishment for screwing up the Rome hit by letting the girl get away. In an effort to save face, he had assumed an attitude of bored resignation, sucking at his teeth and occasionally relieving himself of a fluttering sigh. But something had disturbed him more than being punished like a recalcitrant schoolboy. He sensed that Diamond's interest in Nikolai Hell went beyond professionalism. There was something personal in it, and Starr's years of experience in the trenches of CIA operations made him wary of contaminating the job with personal feelings. As became the nephew of an important man and the CIA trainer in terror, the PLO goat herd at first adopted an expression of strictest attention to the information rear projector on the glass conference table, but as soon as his concentration strayed to the pink tot of Miss Swithin's calves, at which he grinned occasionally in his version of seductive gallantry. The deputy had responded to each bit of information with a curt nod of his head to create the impression that the CIA was current with all this information, that he was merely taking it off mentally. In fact, CIA did not have access to Fat Boy, although the mother company's biographic computer system had long ago consumed and digested everything in the tape banks of CIA and NSA. For his part, Mr. Abel had maintained a facade of thin boredom and marginal politeness, although he had been intrigued by certain episodes in Hell's biography, particularly those that revealed mysticism and the rare gift of proximity sense. For this refined man's taste ran into the occult and exotic, which appetites were manifest in his sexual ambiguities. A muted bell rang in an adjoining machine room, and Miss Swithin rose to collect telephotos of Nikolai Hell that Diamond had requested. There was a silence in the conference room for a minute, save for the hum and click of the first assistant's console, where he was probing Fat Boy's international memory banks and recording certain fragments in his own short-term unit. Mr. Diamond lighted a cigarette he permitted himself for a day and turned his chair to look out the spotlighted Washington Monument beyond the window as he tapped his lips meditatively with his knuckle. Mr. Diamond sighed aloud, straightened the crease of the trouser leg elegantly, and glanced at his watch. I do hope this isn't going to take much longer. I have plans for this evening. Visions of that senator's Ganymede son had been in and out of his mind all evening. Ah, Diamond said, here we are. He held out his hand for the photographs Miss Swithin was bringing from the machine room and leafed through them quickly. They had been in chronological order. The first was a blow-up of his identification picture taken when he started working for the Sphinx/FE cryptography. He passed it on to Mr. Abel, who examined the photograph. Greenly, with excessive enlargement, interesting face, haughty, fine, stern. He paused. He pushed the picture across the deputy, who glanced at it briefly, as if it were familiar with him, and then he gave it to Daryl Starr. Shit, Starr explained. He looks like a kid, 15, 16 years old. His appearance is misleading, Diamond said. At the time this picture was taken, he could have been as old as 23. The youthfulness is a family trait. At this moment, Hell is somewhere between 50 and 53, but I have been told that he looks like a man in his middle 30s. The Palestinian goat herd Where was I? The Palestinian goat herd reached for the photographs, but it was passed then to Mr. Abel, who looked at it again and said, "What's wrong with the eyes? They look artificial." Even in the black and white, the eyes had an unnatural transparency, as though they were underexposed. "Yes," Diamond said, "his eyes are strange. They're a peculiar bright green, like the color of antique bottles. It's his most salient recognition feature. Mr. Abel looked obliquely at Diamond. "Have you met this man personally?" I've been interested in him for years," Diamond said evasively as he passed along the second photograph. Mr. Abel winced as he looked at the picture. It would have been impossible to recognize this as the same man. The nose had been broken and pushed to the left. There was a high ridge of scar tissue along the wall, the right cheek, and another diagonally across his forehead, bisecting the eyebrow. The lower lip had been thickened and split. There was a puffy knob below the left cheekbone. The eyes were closed and the face at rest. Mr. Abel pushed it over to the deputy gingerly, as though he did not want to touch it. The Palestinian held out his hand, but the picture was passed on to Starr. "Shit a deer. Looks like he went to Fist City against a freight train." "What you see there," Diamond explained, "is the effect of vigorous interrogation by Army intelligence. The picture was taken some 3 years after the beating, while the subject was anesthetized in preparation for plastic surgery. And here is a week after the operation." Diamond slid the next picture along the conference table. The face was a little puffy and result of recent surgery, but all the signs of disfigurement were erased, and a general tightening up had even removed the faint lines and marks of age. "But how old was he at this time?" Mr. Abel asked. "Between 24 and 38. "Amazing. He looks younger in the first photograph." The Palestinian tried to turn his head upside down to see the pictures that passed by him. "These are blow-ups of passport photos. The Costa Rican ones date from shortly after the plastic surgery, and the French one a year after that. We also believe he has an Albanian passport. We have no copy of it." Mr. Abel quickly shuffled through the passport pictures, which, true to their kind, were overlit in poor quality. One feature caught his attention as he turned back to the French picture. "Are you sure this is the same man?" Diamond took the picture back and glanced at it. "Yes, this is hell, but the eyes." "I know, didn't mean to spit there, that was rude." "I know what you mean, because the peculiar color of his eyes will blow any disguise. He has several pairs of non-corrective contact lenses that are clear in the center, but colored in the iris, so he can have whatever color eyes he wants to have." "Interesting. Oh yes, hell runs to the ingenious." The OPEC man smiled. "That's the second time I have detected a hint of admiration in your voice." Diamond looked at him coldly. "You're mistaken." "Am I? I see. Are these the most recent pictures of the ingenious but not admired Mr. Hell?" Diamond took up the remaining sheaf of photographs and tossed them in the conference table. "Sure, we have plenty, and they're typical examples of CIA efficiency." The deputy's eyebrows arched in martyred resignation. Mr. Abel leafed through the pictures with a puzzled frown and then pushed them toward Starr. The Palestinian leapt up and slapped his hand on the desk and grinned sheepishly as everyone glared at him in a surprising, rude gesture. He pulled the photographs over to him and examined them carefully. "I don't understand," he admitted. "What is this?" In each of the pictures, the central figure was blurred. They had been taken in a variety of settings: cafes, city streets, the seashore, the bleachers of a whatever that is match, an airport terminal, and they had image compression characteristics of telephoto lenses. But in none of them was it possible to recognize the man being photographed, for he had suddenly moved at the instant of the shutter click. "This is something I do not understand," the goatherd confessed, as though that were remarkable. "It is something that my comprehension does not comprehend." "It appears," Diamond explained, "that Hell cannot be photographed unless he wants to be, although there's a reason to believe he's indifferent about CIA's efforts to track him and record his actions." "So why does he spoil each photograph?" Mr. Abel asked. "By accident. It has to do with his proximity sense of his. He can feel concentration being focused on him. Evidently, the feelings of being tracked by a camera lens is identical with that being sighted through the scope of a rifle. At the moment of releasing the shutter feels like that of squeezing the trigger. So he ducks at the instant the picture is taken," Mr. Abel realized. "Amazing. Truly amazing. Is that admiration I detect? Diamond said archly. Mr. Abel smiled and tipped his head, granting the touch. One thing I must ask. The major who figured in the rather brutal interrogation of Hell was named Diamond. I am aware, of course, the penchant of your people for identifying themselves with precious stones and metals. The mercantile world is richly ornamented with pearls and rubies and golds. Diamond, rubies, and golds. But nevertheless, the coincidence of names here makes me uncomfortable. Coincidence, after all, is fate's major weapon. Diamond tapped the edges of the photographs on his desk to align them, aside, saying offhandedly, Mr. Diamond in question was my brother. I see, Mr. Abel said. Daryl Starr glanced uneasily toward Diamond, his worries about personal involvement confirmed. Sir, the first assistant said, I'm ready with the printout of Mr. Hell's counter-terrorist activities. All right, bring him up to the table. Just surface stuff, no details. I want to give these gentlemen a feeling of what we're facing. Although Diamond had requested the shallow probe of Hell's known counter-terrorist activities, the first outline to appear on the conference table was so brief that Diamond felt called upon to fill in. Hell's first operation was not strictly speaking counter-terrorist. As you see, it was a hit in the leader of the Soviet Trade Commission to Peking. Not long after the Chinese communists had turned up their control over that country. The operation was so inside and so covert that most of the tapes were degaussed by CIA before the mother company began requiring them to give dupes of them to Fat Boy. In bold, it went like this. The American intelligence company was worried about Soviet-Chinese coalition. Despite the fact that there were many grounds for dispute between them, matters of boundaries, ideology, unequal industrial development, and racial mistrust, the think tank boys came up with a plan to exploit their underlying differences and break up the developing nation. They proposed to send an agent to Peking to kill the head of the Soviet Commission and plant incriminating directives from Moscow. The Chinese would think the Russians had sacrificed one of their own to create incident as an excuse for breaking off the negotiations. The Soviets, knowing better, would think the Chinese had made a hit for the same reason. And when the Chinese brought out their incriminating directives as evidence of Russian duplicity, the Soviets would claim that Peking had manufactured the documents to justify their cowardly attack. The Chinese, knowing perfectly well that this was not the case, would be confirmed in their belief that the whole thing was a Russian plot. That the plan worked is proved by the fact that the Sino-Soviet relations never did take firm and are today characterized by mistrust and hostility. The Western Bloc powers are able to play them off each other and prevent them from an overwhelming alliance. The little stumbling block to the ingenious plot of the think tank boys was finding an agent who knew enough Chinese to move through the country undercover, who could pass for a Russian when necessity arose, and was willing to take on a job with a slight chance of success and almost no chance for escape after the hit was made. The operator had to be brilliant, multilingual, a trained killer, and desperate enough to accept this assignment. CIA ran a keyway sort and found one person among their control who fit the description. All right, that's it. Join me next time for some more reading or cigarette reviews. Thank you for coming to